We have the new video now of the 8-year-old boy accused of killing his father and another man who was actually living in a room in their home. In the interview, the boy repeatedly denies being home during those shootings. He calmly lays out an alibi, saying he got off the bus, circled around the block a few times before going home. The quality of the police video is pretty bad, but the interview is quite something else. Listen.
And I ran and I said, "Dad, Dad," and I went upstairs and I saw him.
And you saw him? Okay. And then what?
There's blood all over his face, I think. And I think I touched him.
You think you did touch him? What did you do when you touched him?
I just kind of would check if he was a little bit alive.
You checked if he was a little bit alive? Okay. And how did you do that?
I kind of went like that.
With your foot?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't hear anything. And I just saw blood, and then I cried for like 30 minutes.
Police say the 8-year-old boy later confessed to those murders and that he may be charged as an adult. He's set to appear in court tomorrow. With us now is criminal defense attorney Steve Greenberg, former prosecutor Stephen Clark. Stephen, what do you do with this? I mean, if you're a prosecutor here, what do you do?
Well, your obligation is to prosecute this case. If this was a cold-blooded double homicide, premeditated, the prosecution must go forward. And if they can prove their case, placing this child in a proper institution is really going to be the key to this. But when his initial reaction to the police is to lie, then that tells me he knows what he did was wrong. And that's what's important here. Does the boy know right from wrong?
But Steve Greenberg, there's some questions about the circumstances under which that interview was even conducted.
Sure. I don't even know why they're releasing that. This is a juvenile, and no matter what the crime is, this information is not supposed to become public. Then you have to look at what the story he's telling. The story he's telling is pretty believable. I watched the whole video. It's a plausible, coherent story that he tells. He involves other people, and you have to assume that those other people have been talked to and confirm some of those details. You've got two experienced police officers in that room trying and sweating an 8-year-old kid to confess to a crime. It doesn't surprise me that eventually he broke down and confessed. But I think you have to look at what he originally said, and what he originally said is such a believable story, and it's told so well that I think it's got a ring of truth.
Stephen Clark, there is a lot to this, and you will admit that there are questions about how all this was handled, right?
Absolutely. The police need to be careful anytime they discuss a matter with a juvenile. But I think what's important here is the police had to look at this person as the most important witness in the case. He comes upon a murder scene, so they have to interview him. And what they did is they took him through it, and when the story started to fall apart, that's when they looked at him as a suspect. But I'm sure they have additional forensic information that also ties the boy to this crime. The police have no vested interest in trying to get an 8-year-old boy to confess to a crime he didn't do, because that means someone is getting away. I think that's unfair to characterize the police interrogation in that way.
And then you have to look at Stephen Greenberg. It seems only fair to, in this case, particularly with an 8-year-old, to question, well, what does a conviction of murder against an 8-year-old accomplish for that kid later? I'm not saying let the kid off. I'm just saying it's something you ought to think about, right?
Well, if he gets convicted, he's going to stay locked up probably until he's 21. But, you know, here in Chicago, we had a case a number of years ago, 6, 7 years ago, where an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old confessed to a brutal rape and murder. Turned out they had nothing to do with it. We had a case earlier this year in this country where someone had confessed to a crime, a juvenile. Had nothing to do with it. You have to be suspect. What this kid did was this kid went and got a neighbor who then notified the police. If this kid had committed this crime, it's much more likely that he would have just not called anyone, pretended it never happened at all. You know, that's what happens when kids get caught in trouble. What happened, Johnny?
Here's
I don't know.
the situation, though.
Then they say,
even if this child committed a double homicide, he needs to be protected from society, and society needs to be protected from him. You cannot place this child back into a home setting. I mean, if he calculatedly killed 2 people, that person
Absolutely.
is too dangerous to put back in society.
Rough going. Steve Greenberg, Steve Clark, good of you both. I'm not going to solve anything here today. We'll keep watching this and let folks know what